Hey everyone, welcome to Flourish in the Foreign on YouTube. Flourish in the Foreign is a podcast and platform that celebrates, elevates, and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad while exploring living abroad as a pathway to wellness. I am the creator and host of the show, Christine Job, and today we have a really special live panel. I haven't done these in a long time, and I'm really excited to have this special panel here because, as most of you who will be watching this live or on replay know, the geopolitics of it all is kind of just crazy and fraught. We have the looming United States presidential elections in a couple of days. And this panel is all about politics and international living, Black women's perspectives from around the globe. Now, this panel will explore how politics in both home and host countries shape the reality of Black women living abroad and cover topics such as immigration policies, social movements, cultural acceptance, elections, foreign policy, and more. And you might be asking, why is this important? Well, I hope you're not asking that because it's very important for so many reasons. It's important because living outside of your home country doesn't protect or shield you from your home country politics. And just because you are a foreigner in a country or space does not shield you from your host country's politics. No, not at all. And so I'm really excited to have this really illustrious panel of guests who luckily were all past podcast guests on Flourish in the Foreign to talk about this topic. So I'm going to bring them on one by one. Let me introduce you to. So first, we have Deborah David, who was born in Jacmel, Haiti, who has an extensive experience in international development and nonprofits in the US, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Deborah has over 20 years of work experience in leadership, business and project management, strategic planning, organizational and international development, focusing on Indigenous peoples, disadvantaged populations, violence prevention, education, economic growth, and workforce. So let me bring on Deborah. Hi, Deborah. How are
Hello,
you?
Christine. Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I'm really excited about this panel. Let me introduce our next panelist. So, our next panelist is Dr. Rachel V. Brown, who is a proud 33-year-old Jamaican woman and lecturer at the Ghana Institute of Journalism. In 2020, she earned her PhD and graduated cum laude from Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona with a thesis focusing on the impact of social media activism. She earned her law degree from Wake Forest University and her bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California. I'm sorry, Rachel. University of Southern California. Dr. Brown is an activist who believes we have the power and duty to heal, protect, and restore our earth and its people by first educating others, then implementing impactful changes. Dr. Brown, I apologize. I know you did not go to
It's
South
okay. I was
Carolina.
like, wow, the real USC is where I went. So it's okay. I'm
Oh
forgiving
goodness,
for
I know that because I remember us talking about your time in Atlanta too, and I'm like, as soon as I said, I was like, she did not go to no South Carolina. Anyway, and our final panelist today is Crystal Winston, who is an accomplished American global professional with over 15 years of international experience in public policy and diplomacy, facilitation, and development. Crystal has worked extensively with intergovernmental organizations and governments, most notably the United Nations Human Settlement Program, the Asian Development Bank, and the U.S. Department of State. As among other US federal agencies. So let me bring on Crystal and let me.
Hello. It's great to be
I'm
here.
yes, Crystal. How are you today?
Doing well. Thank you.
Okay, and as you, the watchers, the listeners, the audience can tell, everyone is located in a different country, right? We have Deborah in Ecuador, we have Rachel in Ghana, and we have Crystal in Sri Lanka. I did not put on my country because I already had a long. I'm in Spain. Okay, everyone. I'm in Spain. That's where I am at.
Different
So I
continents
would
too.
yeah, we do. And I think that is what's really important, right? To try to give people, I mean, as much perspective. Obviously, four different countries, four different continents isn't everything, it's not the entire world. But I wanted to give us a well rounded perspective of this really important issue. So I want to get started, and I'm going to pose some questions to you individually, then we're going to open it up. And I'd like for the audience, either watching now or on replay, to leave comments, your own thoughts of your own experience with politics abroad, so that it can be a conversation. Okay. So, first, Deborah, I'd love to speak with you about your experience in Ecuador. So, my first question to you is Ecuador has recently faced increased challenges with cartel violence and international diplomatic tensions, shifting from a relatively peaceful nation to a country grappling with organized crime. What do you see as the biggest challenge or challenges and opportunities for navigating these issues as an expatriate, immigrant, and professional in international development?
Thank you. That's a big question, and it's been interesting for me because I visited Ecuador for the first time back in 2012, and so now I'm seeing, let's say, 12 years of progress, of change. And I was born in Haiti, so I think I also come with this perspective of countries go through challenges. A lot of it is in ebbs and flows, and a lot of it you can see coming. So I would say when I settled here permanently in 2016, it was a very different reality. But there were some signs in terms of the violence that we're seeing right now. A lot of the violence is somewhat in pockets, so it's not generalized. It's not everywhere you go in the country that you're faced with these challenges. But again, that existed even back then. But because it was somewhat compartmentalized, I think for people coming in or just even Ecuadorians in general, it didn't seem like a huge issue. Not until most recently when it did start to kind of spread. And there were sporadic events that were outside of those pockets. So I feel as though those communities are saying, we've been saying this, we've been screaming for help for so long. And so, unfortunately, it's gotten to this point, but it's a good thing now that it's visible. And so there are different policies being put in place to hopefully address it. So I would say at the country level, you have that. And then, of course, for potential expatriates or people or expatriates who are currently living here, for some, it has changed their view in terms of the being able to stay here long term. Some do feel fearful that, what if it continues to spread? What if they're not able to curb it? What does that mean for the future? And then again, some of us and others who are more that can look at things at a big picture and know that no country is perfect, and many countries face similar challenges. It is going to look differently just based on government policy and those who are elected into power. So I almost see that, for in terms of challenges, opportunities for the country is still very welcoming to expatriates. The program or the immigration policy is very flexible, very open. As long as you submit the proper documents, you can pretty much obtain your temporary residency. But again, I think for some, this is going to be a deterrent. Either people are going to choose to leave earlier than anticipated, or people are going to postpone relocating here. On a regional level, because my work is more on a regional level, I would say, and even, starting from the work that I do here in Ecuador, it does impact the way that you move about as a developmental or a development professional. You do start thinking more about security and having, not necessarily in the places where the work is located, but having to get there. If you have to drive through a place where there is heightened violence, then you try to look for an alternative, or does that mean that we wait a little bit until things things calm down? Because again, a lot of it is in ebbs and flows. Regionally, I mean, you are seeing an uptick in migration of Ecuadorians as well. So people are leaving, and then that's kind of bringing about its own set of crises in other places, particularly in Mexico. So I think that the challenge, of course, is getting governments to recognize that these crises are going to happen and to be somewhat preventive in terms of their response, so that on the hindsight, the humanitarian aid isn't as needed or necessary. That's not very likely. That hasn't been my experience in my 20 years. So most likely it's just we're going to be responding to a lot of these crises for a long time, until people are feeling more hopeful where they live. And I think likewise, regionally, you're seeing more attention, which could be a good or bad thing. When I talk about attention, particularly with funders, the US government. So Ecuador was never a country that received a lot of foreign aid because it was considered such a peaceful and stable country. And I think now that's starting to shift, and they're seeing more interest and more opportunities, both at the government level and at the NGO level, to acquire or to access funding to respond to some of these issues that we're seeing.
Oh my goodness. I have so many more questions, but we're gonna move on. But I just want people who are watching right now or replay to understand that migration is a constant ebb and flow, and it is very much affected by um, politics and so many other factors. I think sometimes people kind of shrink migration into, I mean, to themselves, which is fine, right? We're all kind of self-absorbed, but um, gosh, migration and its impacts and the politics of it all, everything affects one another. There's nothing that is happening in a vacuum. And so I feel like we could just talk about this all the time. But let's move on to our second question with our second panelist, Dr. Rachel Brown, who's in Ghana. And so, Dr. Brown, Ghana has long been seen as a stable and welcoming destination for Black people from the diaspora. However, recent tensions between locals and foreign residents have highlighted underlying complexities in these relationships. How do you think the political climate in Ghana is shaping these dynamics, particularly when it comes to social justice, activism, and identity as a Black foreign woman?
Woo! Heavy question, Christine. So I'm going to try and unpack in segments. We know Ghana has been historically super welcoming for Black people and diaspora communities. There was the Year of Return, which has since become Beyond the Return. However, there have been a lot of recent tensions, as mentioned, between local people and foreign residents like myself. I think these things reveal a lot of complexity in the relationships. And the political climate currently also significantly influences the dynamics between locals and foreigners, especially concerning social justice, activism, and identity, as you mentioned. So the question is super on topic. I will say it is an election year for Ghana as well. Elections will take place, I think, the first week of December. And so we're all feeling a little tense and intense right now. But in terms of the political climate and social justice, the political landscape here in Ghana, I think, is marked by a commitment to democracy, or at least it should be, and also development. And so there have been a lot of efforts to strengthen ties between the diaspora and locals, but there are a lot of challenges that persist. So one of the controversial topics that I think I have to mention is the anti-LGBTQ bill, which was signed recently, and that's come across a lot of legal challenges and international scrutiny. And I know there are a lot of diasporans here and locals here who have had quite strong issues with that. I've seen people move as a result of that as well. The other thing that I think we need to discuss is, well, the question talks about activism and identity. So there's a lot of intersectionality for me in terms of my identity, because I'm Black, but I'm a diasporan, I'm a woman, I'm young, and I'm also from Jamaica. So not a local in their eyes, although, we could talk about that later. In my eyes and my identity, I am. And so engaging in activism involves a lot of navigation in terms of the shared cultural identities, but also an understanding that we are different, right? And so the environment can either help with that, and sometimes it does, sometimes it hinders advocacy efforts. A good example of that is the Affirmative Action Gender Bill, which was passed in July of this year. Love that. Love to see the progress, but there's still such a long way to go. And the other thing you mentioned was the tension between locals and foreign residents. So, as a result of our intersectionality and the differences, there have been a lot of, I would say, kickback and fallback as a result of us coming into the country, especially in such a large amount. We're buying the land, and as a result, prices of everything have increased exponentially. This is not just our fault, obviously. There's a lot of economic mismanagement, I would say, on the part of the government. And people are still trying regardless, but a lot of the blame does fall on us as diasporans. And then it's also the idea of this otherness, right? We're here, we're Black, we look like you, but you can tell I'm not you or one of you somehow. And so it's navigating that, and the political climate, including policies on diaspora engagement and women's rights, play a crucial role in how we experience Ghana and how we live here. There was a launch of Ghana's diaspora engagement policy last year, and that helps to strengthen connections with the diaspora, but there's still, as I mentioned, a long way to go. So a lot to unpack, just like sis in Ecuador. But I hope that answered the question. Still a long way to go. Yeah.
It does. And again, I mean, I see this panel discussion as obviously a Kickstarter for hopefully a lot of the people who will watch, because this is not a one and done conversation. These are nuanced conversations. These are conversations that are living and breathing and affect us who live and breathe. So it's important for us not to think a vote, an election, and that's it, or something like that, but that there are just continuing ramifications to decisions. And there's just so much, it's so rich, really. Crystal, I would love to ask you your individual question that came up with. Crystal is in Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka has faced immense political upheaval, with citizens ousting a corrupt head of state amid widespread protests. I'm wondering, how has this political instability affected your work and personal life as a foreign Black woman living in Sri Lanka? And how do you navigate safety, security, and professional obligations during such a tumultuous time?
That's a great question. I'll start with the personal effects for the sake of those travelers interested in visiting here. I was here in 2021 during the tumultuous time, or the most tumultuous time here, and into 2022 as well. And while the Western media largely reported it as, chaos and rioting, I actually felt quite safe. And the reason for that is something that I learned while doing volunteer service abroad. And that is that community is really your safety. So getting connected to the local community, let me know what is the day to go out. Maybe don't go out in the night because something is happening, something is brewing. And so keeping an ear to the ground and really listening to local connections and relationships helped me to stay very safe during that time. I really did not feel seriously threatened at any point, even when I walked through protests on my way to, run my errands or to go to, an obligation. So I think that that's one of the biggest takeaways for me going through this, is that community really is your sense of safety if you can build those bridges and those bonds. In terms of work, it's been a kind of double-edged sword. So on one hand, lots of Sri Lankans are migrating. They're going abroad to find opportunity because of the economic collapse that we experienced in 2021 following COVID. So we have a brain drain on one hand, but on the other hand, the businesses that are still active here are forced to globalize. They're forced to reach out in order to make revenue. So that creates incredible opportunity and the ability to give back and contribute here by sharing business skills, communication skills that would not be readily available here. But as a foreigner, as a native speaker, this is just kind of an advantage or a gift that I have that I can give. So in many ways, it's been both personally beneficial, but also personally very challenging to go through this time. So it's very much a mixed bag. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe the complexity of my time here over the past few years.
I mean, you said so much. One, that it's a mixed bag. It's never black and white. There's always shades of gray, and the shades of gray are really dictated not only by your personal experience, but as you said, your integration community, so they can help you translate the shades of gray that you might be perceiving. And to your point, I think community is, I mean, I think we all understand intellectually how important it is, and maybe even emotionally, but I think it is absolutely vital in the context of politics in a country that is foreign to you, no matter how much history that you learn, no matter how much BBC, Al Jazeera you watch, like being in touch with community helps put things into context, especially during tumultuous times when you're like, you don't have time to be like, so I know you hate this party, but what can I do my groceries? Like, I don't know. Like, it's important to have community to know and to protect you and to help translate those things for you. I will briefly talk about Spain. I live in Spain. I've lived in Spain for the past 7 years. And I wrote a question for myself. I don't know if I really want to answer it, but here we go. I'll go ahead. Spain has a unique position in the European political landscape with its ongoing internal debates over Catalonia, immigration, and economic recovery. And so I'm asking myself, how do you see these political dynamics influencing your work and life in Spain? And even Dr. Rachel, she used to live in Spain too, so I would love to hear your thoughts. How do you see these political dynamics influencing your work and life in Spain, and what have been your experiences balancing the country's internal politics with your goals of wellness and empowerment for Black women? That's a question I pose to myself. I used to live in Catalonia. I used to live in Barcelona. That's where I met Dr. Rachel, and I lived there for 3.5 years. So out of my 7 years in Spain, I lived 3.5 in Barcelona. And I would say that in the politics of the country has shifted a great deal. I think everyone was obviously very affected by the pandemic, but the Catalonia's independence movement definitely has shifted, I feel, politics to the right to a certain extent, and the pandemic had also brought up a lot of right-leaning sentiments. I think, though, one of the reasons why I left Barcelona, to be quite frank, was that the independence movement was very intense and disruptive for me, and I was just like, this is not my life. Barcelona has like a very strong thread of like anarchy, which I don't know if people know that. They're like, oh, it's so cute and pretty and IG ready. I'm like, yeah, but as soon as, Rachel, you know this, if there was uh like a court hearing or anything, and I
Any
live next to exactly. I live next to Arc de Triomphe, which is close to the Palacio de Justicia. Anything, fire, cars on fire, trash bins on fire, things cut down. And I was like, I understand that I don't live in a vacuum and no place is utopia, but I did not move to Spain for this. I didn't. And I moved in 2017. And when I moved, I first lived in La Rioja, but I first moved to Barcelona, like in the interim. So I was in Barcelona from August to September 30th, 2017. On October 1st was the independence elections. You said the grandma's getting beaten up, all the kind of stuff. So that's my kind of context. For me, I try to understand the intricacies of the Catalans and the Spanish and all those things. But and I think I did, but I just was like, this is not for me. I was like, this is not necessarily supportive of my wellness. But Dr. Rachel, do you have any thoughts you want to add to Spain from your experience?
Yeah, I think the independence movement, while it was inconvenient, I found that as a Black woman, as someone who has been an activist, it allowed me to kind of empathize and
Mhm.
understand, right? The fight and the need for the fight. So, yeah, it probably would have been a little more annoying if it was something I didn't believe in and understand. But I was like, yeah, I get you. But also that understanding of identity, like having to form our own little groups within Catalonia, which felt also excluded because we were feeling super mega excluded as Black people, as Black women living there. I
Mhm.
think also when we touch on the immigration aspect, woo, Spain,
Yes.
a nightmare for us.
Yeah.
I'm based on my experiences and observation, a nightmare. That was the hardest immigration experience I've ever had in any country around the world. And then the other part was the economic recovery, just seeing how impacted the economy was and that underlying tension, not just with them, but with us, and understanding how to navigate the rent going from doubling over. It was kind of nuts. And so I think navigating these dynamics meant kind of aligning work with the social and cultural context. I was definitely researching the independence movement as part of my thesis and dissertation. And so I was in there, and I'm with you, Christine. Agreed and co signed everything. Yeah.
It's it's a lot. And I don't understand people who um can live in a space that is any space, even if you're not having, cars being set on fire every time there's a
Right.
court appearance. Um, I don't understand people who can live in a country and be in such a bubble and
Completely
feel as
unaffected.
pol-
Yeah.
yeah, like politics doesn't affect you. And I feel as Black women, we don't actually get that luxury. No matter if we are deemed good foreign, bad foreign, because as y'all know, there's all these types of foreign that you can be. Um, it affects us and affects our well-being. I want to continue on and open up this next question. So let's talk about something that we've already touched on, which is intersection of politics and identity. And so the question is here, as Black women living abroad, each of us navigates complex layers of identity, race, gender, nationality, and foreign political context. How do you see your identities influencing the way you're perceived in your host countries? And how have you used your experiences to shape your work, either in activism, development, or entrepreneurship? And who would like to take that question first? Who? Or do I have to popcorn one of y'all? Who?
I'll go. I'll
Quick.
go. I've thought a lot
Okay.
about this. Yes,
Okay.
because I feel like, and just I want to say that, even with these first set of questions that we went through, it's amazing to see 4 different countries, 4 different continents, and I could have answered all of those questions. So everything that's happening in all of our respective host countries it's just there's just this line of connectivity where we're experiencing, maybe not at the same time, but very similar situations. So with this, I always think of, as Black women, we carry a lot, because initially for me in Latin America, there are communities of Afro descendants, and some places very strong communities. So upon just seeing me, a lot of times the assumption is I'm from one of those communities. Then when I speak, then it's, oh, you're not. And then the questions of where are you from? And what I have prioritized in answering that question is first saying that I'm from Haiti. I think my experience as a Haitian American, it's very different, and it bears saying and stating. And then, of course, sometimes they even hear me speaking English, and then, I can say, yes, but I grew up in the US. So, I do have that American side of me as well. And That often, so you go from, you're from a poor community that struggles, because that unfortunately is the reality for a lot of predominantly Black communities in Latin America. And then it goes to, oh, you're from a poor country that struggles. And then to, oh, you're a gringa. Oh, you have money and you have resources. And, and so just in a span of 2 minutes, going from, having to identify with all of that. And then I have found that it's why it's important for me even after 8 years of being here. And a lot of times people say, well, you're an Ecuadorian. I'm not. And not to say it in a bad way. It's, I don't have the same lived experience. I don't have the same culture, really. I don't have the same lifestyle that a lot of Ecuadorians have, and that's by choice. So I don't want to be inauthentic and pretend. And just because I've been here 8 years, but I've been here in a different space and as a different person. The other thing that I see is important in marking that difference is it opens the door for me to share my experience and say what activism has looked at like for me, what being Black in predominantly white spaces has been like for me. I don't know if I would have that if I pretended to be an Ecuadorian and have the same. No, so it often helps to kind of open that conversation. And by sharing that, I'm very mindful. This is not me saying this is how you should do it. I know, and I recognize the differences, huge differences, from institutionalized racism to more like structure and societal. And again, that to me I found such interesting conversations where I've learned a lot. And it's always coming from that place of, I want to learn from you and I want to share my experiences, and that's it. Nobody here is trying to impose. I'm not trying to tell you that you're behind. And even if that could be the tone sometimes, or the what I often get to is, wow, the US is a very racist country. Unpacking that and having that sort of, again, give us a space to talk about these things and what are those misperceptions. And I just am very careful. I always see myself as a guest where I am, and I want to be kind and be mindful of I'm a guest. I've been invited to be here, and I want to continue to be invited to be here, and I want that respect to be reciprocated. So that's how I've approached it, and I feel like it's a journey, right? I don't think this is ever going to be like a destination. Oh, I figured it out. Now I know how to navigate these political and all these inequities into other spaces. I'm just continuously learning and engaging with locals and listening and really trying to embrace their experiences and share mine.
I love that. Anyone else want to comment on that question on identity?
I'd love to. Crystal, did you want to? Because I know
I'm enjoying listening to this one. I have lots to say about it, but please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I was like, you can go first if you want to. So I'll start off with the fact that Ghanaians, for the most part, love Jamaicans. And so that's made things a little tiny bit easier. But there are other aspects of me. We talked about intersectionality that have made things a little challenging. So, for example, living as a Black, because the treatment of the white people is different. A Black single woman in Ghana has been a little hectic. Sometimes it feels like I'm constantly fighting stereotypes or pushing back against judgment. I use this example all the time where I took my car to the mechanic and the mechanic refused to tell me what was wrong with my car because I wouldn't understand. And so I had to call my father in Jamaica to have the mechanic speak to him about what was going on with my car right in front of me that I was paying for. So it can get very deeply ignorant sometimes. And I'm just constantly, I guess, stuck in this mode of having to, like, women's empowerment, like, how dare you, like, fight, but at the risk of things not getting done. And so it's like balancing that constantly is pretty pretty exhausting for me, to be honest. Also, being single here can bring a lot of assumptions and challenges. if I say to someone I'm single, first question is why? Like something's wrong with me, more or less. But that's made me even more determined to stand tall and really create change. So I would say with my background and identity, I get seen through so many different lenses every day. Sometimes people are curious, sometimes they make assumptions, but instead of letting it weigh me down, I like to use it to spark conversations if I have the energy for the conversations and hopefully break down the stereotypes. I think also having to face these hurdles every single day of my life also helped to fuel my mission to empower women and girls. I'm really, really passionate about that. So whether I'm teaching in the classroom or working with some of my clients or running my nonprofit, I make sure everyone's voice is heard, especially the women and girls, that everyone feels respected and valued, because a lot of times those voices are suppressed here. And as a Jamaican woman, we know that, I would say. So building spaces where women can thrive and feel seen. And then thirdly, I would say it's made me fiercely intentional. So I'm super intentional about creating programs and projects that give space to everyone who might be overlooked. And I want to make sure that they feel the strength and the freedom to be themselves unapologetically. And that's what I want for myself too. So it's been challenging, but understanding the different perspectives and understanding the reasons behind the perceptions has been helpful in helping me to live a little bit more peacefully and less stressfully here. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Crystal?
Yeah, I to that. So I spend a lot of time in rooms in Casablanca because of working with a local woman-owned business. And really fascinating the layers of curiosity that people have when they meet someone and they really have no idea what to think about you. I'm in Asia, so there isn't the same diaspora connection that you might experience in countries with diaspora present, African diaspora present. My first question is usually that I get, are you from Africa? Which part of Africa? And then if I tell people, well, kind of, but I'm American, my whole family's in America. We've always been in America. There's confusion. And then after the confusion, there's what part of the US, and it's an entire spectrum of experience. And then being a professional woman in a place where women are still largely expected to stay in the home and to raise the children and to not work after marriage. So someone at my age would typically not be working. She would be looking after her home. And so it raises a lot of curiosity, especially among local women and men. I mean, everyone really, children are looking, But I think that's an entry point into conversation. And so as someone who spends time in a classroom, it's incredibly powerful to have that curiosity, because so often we listen to have something to say. But when we're truly open and truly curious, we're listening to understand. We're asking questions to understand. And that's a very powerful gateway when you are, leading, teaching, doing activism, all of these things are really helpful gateways. So I try to look at it that way and use influence that I have, as an American in a positive way.
Okay, I'm going to give you my perspective, but while I'm doing that, I would invite my panelists, because they have our panelist questions and we only have a limited time, to peruse our panelist questions and maybe think of our next question. I'll let you guys pick our next question if you guys want to, okay? I would say when it comes to identity, it's so layered in Spain. Um, it's so interesting. I identify as an American and also as a Caribbean woman. I'm Trinidadian. And I got quickly irritated by the questions of de dónde eres, de dónde eres, de dónde eres. And I would just say Atlanta as my act of defiance and also like education, to be like, look it up on a map. It's not New York, it's not LA. And that's interesting because then I realized how much people know about Atlanta, and they would tell me their generation and also their kind of preconceived notions. The younger people are like, oh, Atlanta, the TV show, and they have that perception, or trap music, and they have that perception, or older people are like just blank stare, and they're just like, don't know what you're talking about, or maybe the Olympics. Um, I find though, being in Spain, I'm an unambiguously Black woman. I have copper locks, so they're just like, we know Africa, or I get Jamaica, and I'm like, no, no, So you have ignorance, I would say. I think one could say ignorance, some could say curiosity. Um, when they hear me speak Spanish, they don't think I'm Afro Spanish. So they're like, oh, where are you from? And, I try to prolong, I think, revealing that I am from the United States because passport privilege is real and the perception can change. And I think part of me being Black American in a society, especially a chocolate city like Atlanta, in which we all Black is like a sentiment. Um, I think I've used that a lot because I have a big problem with the difference of treatment between Black people of different origin,
Yeah.
migratory origin in Spain. Because again, I'm unambiguously Black. I'm not like, so something. They're like, negative. Okay, yeah. But then it's like, but you speak with this accent, it sounds like this, oh, you're American, and then it's a different, story. And I'm not with that. I'm not with it. I don't like it, and I don't tolerate it. I receive a lot of benefits because I have this blue passport. As Rachel was speaking about, immigration is quite difficult in this country. It is quite difficult, but I definitely know that my migratory experience on that regard was probably faster or easier because of this blue passport. And it's something that could be a discussion in and of itself. My ancestors built the country, so I should flex this passport privilege. But then I'm like, I don't like this situation. Like, I don't like the politics surrounding passport privilege, because you're making all these assumptions and they're utilized, very much to effect with imperialism in mind. And I don't. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. It's been strange, and then finding community also has been interesting in Spain because, again, being, I think, from the South and American, but also Trinidadian, a warmth, a hospitality, a happiness to see other Black people is innate inside of me. And being in Europe, European Black people are very different. So that has been an interesting experience also in the dynamic of politics, race, immigration, because of how they see themselves in their own Blackness. So like Afro-Spanish people, they don't give me the Black person, what's up? They don't give me the head nod. And it's just very fascinating uh, how identity all plays into it. I will leave it at that because I could talk about that for a long time. But let's move on to the next question. Has anyone chosen our next question, or should I pick it?
I think we kind of
Five.
highlight. I know I highlighted one,
Oh,
but I
Okay.
also see. Yes, I see. Yes, there's another one. I feel like my answer is going to tie in the two. So,
Okay. So which one?
about resilience and wellness, and handling the political instability, the tensions that exist while abroad, and how to practice self care.
Okay. Yeah. So great. Perfect. We'll do these two. Okay. So our lovely panel, navigating political instability or tension can take a toll. Yes, it can, on mental, emotional, and physical well being. What strategies have you developed to maintain wellness while managing the demands of your work and the complexities of political life in your respective countries, or politics on your life in your respective countries? Who wants to start? Deborah, do you want to start?
has to be
Yeah, since I
Deborah.
picked. Yes. No, and this is, I think, especially right now, because I feel that whether you're in the US or you're outside, you're feeling this in some ways. And what I've realized is, that political tension, it exists everywhere. I definitely see from, being abroad, how intense it's become in the US, where it feels like every election is do or die, and it's, going to shape so much of our future. And balancing that, so that really, I think, for a lot of countries outside the US, has been the sentiment, like, all elections are important, democracy is a little bit more fragile. Any, strong protests, there's an upheaval, government is unturned, we're starting, or overturned, and we're starting over. And what does that mean? So again, I think having the Haitian experience, and you never get used to it. It is always hard. It is always, and as I think, as we get older and you're seeking out more stability and calm, it affects you even more. I have children, so every unexpected event or protest, I start thinking about their school. What does this mean for them? Like, how is this going to impact day to day? So I what I try to do in these moments is just take a step back, look at the big picture, and think of, what is my day to day? Am I able to eat? Am I able to move about freely? Because sometimes you're not, depending on where you are. You have to check in with your neighbors and say, can I go to the grocery store today? Do you think it'll be okay? Do we have running water? Do we have electricity? Like, just the basics, and taking it to that, and reminding myself that I'm okay. We're okay. And, at the end of the day, recognizing my privilege. Worst case scenario, I can usually find a way to get out, to be evacuated. Luckily, with all the difficulties that I've lived through in Venezuela and Ecuador, I haven't had to use that. But knowing that and saying, okay, let's not think of all of the uncertainty and all the things that I can't control and what's happening, because it's even harder when you don't fully understand the culture, and you're not fully, you can't even really gauge. I feel like with the US, there is a sense of, no matter how bad, like, we do bounce back. Something horrible could happen today. The next day, people are at work, and so not knowing that, and that's usually not the case in other places. Just knowing, okay, well, this is happening, and I don't know when it's going to get back to normal. But in the meantime, do we have food? Do we have, all the basics that keep us grounded and that keep us really healthy, and focusing on that versus all of the uncertainty. And I just think about, and then kind of, tying into the second question about migration as liberation. I'm sure all of us receive questions from people thinking that leaving the US is going to solve all their problems. And what I remind them is, no, it's going to make you more of what you already are. So if you're miserable, and, because of X, Y, and Z, you're not leaving that behind. And what I always recommend is, when you make that choice to leave, and to expatriate, migrate, make sure that you're not running from, you're running to. So whatever you have that is frustrating you and that is making it very difficult, resolve that. Make sure that you're at peace with that, where you are. And that, I think, even going from one place to another, whether it's, me going from Venezuela to Ecuador, it's always making sure that we're not in this habit of running away from things, because you never really do. And whatever is really hard for you to deal with emotionally, where you currently are, will probably take on another form, and you will still have that struggle. So always trying to kind of bring it back to, make sure that I'm at peace, and make sure that I'm what I'm doing is because I'm looking forward to something new, and I want to, learn about these things and explore these things and challenge myself in these ways. But it's not because I think that all of the problems that exist now are going to disappear in this new place. These problems, as we are seeing with our conversation, are universal. They just take on different forms, and we have to adjust in different ways. So that is my advice in terms of keeping, trying to practice self-care, keeping our mental health at the forefront in these challenging times.
I wonder, I'll just want to jump in before I let everyone else respond. I wonder though about the US. You said the US usually like bounce back and they're off to work, but I wonder if that's because Americans are so disconnected from themselves, um, and don't have proper morning rituals. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think in an attempt for everyone to assimilate and everyone is American, I think we don't have morning rituals. You know what I'm saying? Like, so something catastrophic could happen, and the thing to do is to compartmentalize and move on.
Mm,
which works well for like getting shit done. Like, yep,
exactly.
getting shit done, gotta be productive. But for the health of
Right.
a nation and of individuals, of community, especially I think community, because in community, you should be able to be a mess and things like that. But if everyone must be buttoned up, then how can I even ever ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar or lean on somebody for anything since everyone's supposed to like be buttoned up? And I don't know, when you said that, I was like, gosh, that goes to the lack of wellness in the United
Right.
States in my point of view, because here in Spain, I didn't address this at the very beginning. I was going to, but I live in Valencia. Valencia has gone through catastrophic flooding. We've had 3 days of mourning, which I don't think any time I've ever lived in the United States we've ever had one day of mourning of
Yeah.
anything. We've had 3 days of mourning, 3 days of mourning. We've had mourning groups, not like WhatsApp, and then all around the community, people coming together to mourn and to help. And it has been shocking,
Mm,
especially as someone who was like wellness. But it's amazing how much there is to learn through community and through experience of true wellness and things like that. But I'm gonna let someone else answer that. Anyone else want to answer or respond to that question before we move on to our last question?
mhm. I know I do, but I'm gonna let Crystal go first this time.
I will definitely answer that one. Going through the crisis, I mean, yes, there were definitely people running into the presidential palace and things were on fire, and it was incredibly stressful in many ways. Even though I physically never felt threatened, having that environment around you does filter in. Particularly reading the media, and the Western media can be a little colorful with their descriptions about what's going on in other parts of the world. So I limited my intake of Western media, and I found that I was getting better information from just everyday journalists who live here in Sri Lanka, and they were posting on the scene live as things were happening. And so I just turned my kind of gaze into community, conversations and people posting who other people trusted, and that was it went a long way in alleviating my stress and helping me manage those feelings of anxiety in the middle of that kind of a change, as well as staying connected to my family and letting them know I'm fine and I'm safe. It's a different kind of concern when your family isn't with you. So my parents and my siblings are in the U.S. at the time, so, keeping them grounded and keeping them calm and letting them know I'm fine. I don't need to be, airlifted out or anything like that. Um, that actually in turn helped me to maintain my own sense of level, being able to help them retain their own calm. So I think sometimes the best way to work through these things to maintain our own health and wellness is in community. It's the reaching out to other people and not letting yourself be isolated in that situation. I found that if you ever find yourself in such a struggle while traveling, I hope no one watching ever has to go through that. But if you do, definitely reach out. That would be my best advice.
Great. Good advice. I'll just jump straight in if that's okay,
Mhm.
Christine.
Yes, please.
Echoing that. Also, what you said earlier, Christine, because when Deborah was talking about the just bouncing back, I was like, that is not healthy or okay.
Mhm.
We should not be doing that. But for me, the first thing, I don't know if it's the first thing, but one of the things I do is my mom challenged me to have a Sabbath day. Doesn't matter what day it is, but a day when I rest, recharge, do what I need to do selfishly, almost. And so I make sure every week, one day out of the week, is at least half of it is zero work because I'm a lady. I'll work every day because I have stuff to do. So self care. The second one is staying connected. So I'm very close to my parents. We talk and check in all the time. Also, I have a few outlets in terms of my Jamaican culture, some Jamaican people here, which helps, sometimes from time to time when I want to relax. That also leads into the next point about building a support system. So I have people here that I can call on if I need them, if I need to cry, if I need to be quiet, whatever it may be. And they also understand that sometimes I just want to be by myself and they're fine with that. So that's super helpful. Another thing is mindful disconnecting, because I mean, we mentioned this already. Sometimes you just need to take a step back, take a break from the news and social media. The world will continue whether or not you know what's happening in it. And so, yeah, I'll do that from time to time. And then also making sure that I channel purpose into my work and ensuring that whatever I'm doing, it's something that I'm passionate about and finding fulfillment in. And that helps from it feeling like work and stress all the time. Like I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose. So I would say those are the things that I do to help. Yeah.
Okay, let's hit this last question because I'm so happy you guys selected this because I've been writing a lot about this particular topic, which is migration as liberation. Is
Mm.
it really liberation? Why or why not? Okay, so living abroad is often seen as a pathway to freedom, a pathway to wellness, as I say, especially for Black women. Yet, with the shifting political climates in many countries, do you still view migration as a form of liberation? How do you reconcile the realities of political challenges with the ideals of wellness and empowerment? Who wants to take that one first? I love that question.
I this question. I'm happy
Okay.
to take this one. One thing that's always with me, I heard this a while ago. Wherever you are, there you'll be. And if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, you bring yourself with you wherever you go. Cut what you were saying earlier, Deborah. Run from it's in you. Actions or your perspective on things are problematic, that problem will follow you. So it's what I do value about migration is what it opens up in a person. You know, being open to new ideas, sharing your experience with others, exploring those things, I believe, tend to liberation. They may not be liberation, but they seem to be tools of liberation. So, for what it's worth, I do think there are tools to be found in migration. Whether it is liberation in as an end in itself, I think that depends on the person and their perspective and how they engage with migration. But I think the challenges of migration are also incredibly empowering. And it teaches you about your own ability to adapt and persevere, but not to say or to encourage a glorification of struggle and challenge. I'm the last one to encourage that. But I think there's a lot we can learn in the migration process. And those tools can lead to liberation if we take them and we use them wisely.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Anyone else want to comment on migration as liberation? Why or why not?
I definitely do. So for me, the simple act of migrating is a radical form of freedom, in my opinion. Like simply moving from where you're from to go live somewhere else. That's radically freeing and liberating. And so for me as a person, migration has been a powerful journey of liberation, especially as a Black woman. I would say, as a single Black woman as well, it's allowed me to step into spaces and a space where I could truly define myself and feel like myself and explore different parts of myself for the first time in my life. And I'm sure you all have experienced similar things that you just wouldn't do at home. Suddenly you feel the freedom to do that without all the societal expectations. I think I've also been able to reclaim and reshape my narrative by moving to new countries and understand myself a bit better. And so the freedom to live out my identity on my own terms is, I think, a profound form of liberation. The other thing is turning challenges into strength. Relocation It's not easy. I don't think we would ever preach that on flourishing in the foreign ever in life. It's not easy. It's not simple. But I do think for the most part, it is worth it. And facing issues like discrimination, navigating complex systems abroad has already taught me just how resilient I am. And I don't really feel like being resilient anymore. I just want to kind of rest. But at least I know I have the capacity, right? Which is good and helpful. And then defining freedom from within. I think I agree with the point of not running from running to, but I also kind of disagree with it because for me, I left the US in 2016 and I was running from it. Um, I'm gonna be so open and honest and real right now. The same thing happened to me when in 2006. I don't know if six is a number for me, but I left Jamaica at 16 hours running for my life, right? Because the situation was not healthy where I was. So I would say if it's unhealthy, if you need to escape, don't wait till it gets better. Just get out of there as fast as you possibly can. So I'm sorry if that conflicts with other opinions, but that's my personal experience. Won't be going back um, to live at least. So I think, yeah, it's understanding that. And while freedom does come from within, your environment does affect how free you do feel. So I would say go to places where you do feel free, and that's not going to be everywhere. And then also, I want to touch on liberation as collective empowerment as Black women around the world. We can say that on this, session, like different parts of the world, different continents. I think it's no longer just about personal freedom in a selfish sense. It's about collective freedom and redefining what it means, if it means anything, to be a Black woman, right? Reshaping our entire identity and the perception of us everywhere we go. And it's about carrying forward a legacy of strength and resilience and liberation, and being able to say what it means to be a Black woman on our own terms. So I think that to me is what it's about. And so, yeah, migration is liberation. If you want to go somewhere, go. I support you.
I love that. Deborah, do you have any thoughts or reflections on that?
Just that I agree, and I think it comes from a place of privilege, right? To be able to say, I think I would like, versus when you feel I cannot stay here. And I have the privilege of working with people who make those difficult choices every day. And you're absolutely right. I would also just add that as a first generation immigrant, that it is liberating in the sense that the idea for my family or for my parents was, we're sacrificing all of it. We're liberating ourselves from the difficulties that we're facing here. And we're going to give you new opportunities. And then to say, for me to make the choice, I'm going to leave that and go beyond and look for opportunities in a different place. That was a form of liberation, recognizing the courage and the bravery it took for them to do it, but then knowing that I had that in me and reminding them that I'm getting this from you, just like you were able to do it, and taking and sort of diminishing this idea that US is the end all be all. This is the only place that we can thrive, and this is the only place we can flourish. So I agree very much so, as it is very liberating, and being able to take on those and not be limited, again, privilege, not be limited by a geography per se, with a strong passport, and say, hey, I'm going to start over, as hard as it is, not assuming that I'm going to be problem free, but it's going to be a different type of journey, and I'm up for the challenge. And I'm taking the courage of my ancestors with me into this new place. So.
I mean, I love everything you guys said. I mean, y'all were all on my podcast, so I was going to agree with everything you said. But I think that the discussion of migration as liberation is something that has a depth to it that I think I'd like everyone to marinate on, all the listeners to marinate on. I think that I typically say, I don't want people to move from a space of escapism or romanticization. But if you do move from that space, recognize that it is up to you to then set the parameters of, or not only set the parameters, but be an active participant in cultivating your experience in this space and deciding what this is going to be for you. Because fortunately, living in a foreign space, as a foreigner, I've always seen it as it gives you space because people are not necessarily expecting you to be like everybody else. They're like, you're a foreigner, you are other. And I think it's an interesting feeling to embrace, because it gives you that time, that resources, that little space in which you could decide on what is liberation for you, how to cultivate a life well lived, and to be an active participant. I think though it's a discussion that or it's a topic that I'm writing a lot about. Some of you guys know that I'm currently writing my first book, tentatively called Flourish in the Foreign, A Black Woman's Guide to Cultivating a Life Well Lived. It is exploring the intersection of migration, Blackness, womanhood, and wellness. Even though, what is wellness? Wellness means nothing now, but I think actually for Black women, it means so much. It goes beyond the beauty and the aesthetics of Black girl soft life, which I love. I want more of it, but goes more into embodiment. What does it mean to be embodied in wellness as a Black woman? Therefore, what does liberation as not an idea or an ideal, but as an embodied experience look like? And then how do we navigate that in this geopolitical landscape in which nothing happens in a vacuum? Something happens over here, it's affecting something over here. How do we do that? I'm really excited to get that out to all of you, and I'm really excited to have this amazing panel to discuss this topic. I could talk to you guys for 4 hours because there's so much to unpack here. So I hope people who are watching really took these gems, because this is just such a needed conversation, and I don't ever see it ever happening in this space. As we close, though, I would love for each one of our guests to give us maybe a last parting remarks or advice, and then also tell everyone where they can find you on the internets. Who wants to start? How about Deborah? Deborah, you want to start?
Well, I thought Crystal would want to, since we started.
I thought it was going to be Crystal too.
Crystal, do you want to?
I started last time.
Somebody jump in.
Yes.
All right. Well, no, I mean, this was so lovely. Thank you, Christine, for organizing this. I mean, I hope one day we can all be in the same place, just miraculously at the same time, and continue, or we have other opportunities to continue this conversation. Parting words, I would just say, take a breath. It's a very tense time, and everything feels so heightened. But some deep breaths, and just remind yourselves and remind ourselves of our strength and our ability to find peace within, and stay grounded in that as we navigate these next few weeks. You can find me on my podcast, Well, Why Not? ? On Spotify, and then from there you can listen to it from the various platforms.
Wow, nice.
All right, Dr. Rachel.
Yes. Okay. So first thing, I think I'm going to say 3 points. Number 1 is stand in your truth and own your story, whatever that is. The authentic version of you will always be the most powerful and best version of you. I would say also, when you empower yourself, when you move, when you liberate yourself, don't forget your responsibility to other people around you, right? It's your responsibility and your duty to continue to uplift those around you, particularly in your community, I would say. The third one is, let your journey be a reflection of your purpose. And if you don't know what your purpose is yet, then probably finding that purpose is part of your purpose, and it'll be the same thing regardless. So live boldly, inspire others, and enjoy life. You deserve to enjoy life, whatever that looks like for you. Where can you find me? Honestly, you can't really find me right now. Christine knows I'm not on
true. That's true. I'm trying to find her on LinkedIn. She's not on LinkedIn.
I'm hiding you guys, man. If you really need me, then DM Flourish in the Foreign. Christine knows how to find me, just in case. But you have to be
Just
following
yeah.
Flourish in the Farm regardless. So, Christine knows.
Crystal.
All right. So you can find me online. I'm doing a few different things, including design, a nonprofit for youth here in Sri Lanka. I also work with a woman-owned local business here that is providing business communication training for local professionals and branching out beyond the island. But right now we're focused on Sri Lanka. So I'm doing a lot of things. There are many places to find me. But the place where it all comes together is my LinkedIn account. You can just put my name in. I'm Crystal Winston and LinkedIn. And then I'm also on Instagram, kind of a personal page. But you can also find me there with Crystal Winston as well.
Wonderful. And my parting words of advice would be to be curious and be informed. Please, one, seek out community and cultivate community so that you can get a deep understanding of history and of politics wherever you are. But also, please diversify your news sources. Please diversify your news sources so that you can get a better understanding of global politics and how much that is used and how it's fun depending on where you are around the world. It's actually very fascinating if you have the time to be able to see a news story that comes out and see how it gets played out from this country, that country, that country, and that country. It is very interesting. And I think once you have that experience, you will understand the need to be politically aware and to have your finger on the pulse of things. Um, I'd also say everyone who is a US citizen to please vote. Please vote because your vote affects not just US citizens abroad, but everyone else in the world. That's how that works. So please vote. You can find all of these amazing women also on the Flourish and Foreign podcast. I meant to write down all of y'all's episodes, but I did not. But I know what season you guys are in. Deborah was in season 3. Now, see, now I'm questioning myself. Season 4. Season 4. Crystal was in season 5, and Dr. Rachel was in season 1.
Original.
So you can always check it out. Do you know your episode?
No, I was like the original season.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
me.
yeah. She was in the original season when I thought I was going to do a episode every day of the week
I
for 4 years.
remember that. Ambitious.
Yeah, and I stopped at about like 48 or something, 50 something. I was like, okay, we've got to stop this madness. Gotta stop. We gotta go to seasons. So please check out their episodes. Flourish and Foreign is an audio first podcast, but I do have some visual content on YouTube, and we will have visual podcast, even much to my chagrin, in next season, which is season 6, launching in 2025. Listen to the podcast across all platforms: Spotify, Apple, here, everywhere. I realized that I didn't see any comments, but I didn't have any pop-up comments. So if you have any comments, comment, and I will go back and find you and respond to you. Thank you all so much for coming to this live, for watching it on the replay. I think it is really important. And please remember that, you know, moving abroad, like, is an amazing experience, but it does require active participation. That's all I want to say. I won't go too far because we're already late. But as I always say, it's not about moving abroad. It surely is not about being abroad. It is about thriving abroad. It is about flourishing abroad. So go abroad and cultivate a life well lived. Please be politically active